Okay, so in the last podcast, oh, by the way, it's Sunday morning. We're waking up in the Houston area to a disaster of historic proportions. I know a lot of y'all from Katy area, from the Houston area, just all around. It's really horrible. I live over by the medical center in Houston. My street is flooded. Um, uh, so far, it hasn't gotten too much into our yard, but I know a lot of folks have flooded. And as cliched as this sounds, honest to God, my thoughts and prayers go out to everybody in this area. It's who's suffering, and this is not over by any stretch of the imagination. It's completely mind-boggling what's happening. Anyway, okay, so I'm recording this now and I'm posting it because I'm anticipating some sort of power outage that may last for a week or so. Um, in the and I guess the other thing y'all want to know is if there's a power outage and I don't get the quiz posted or whatever, don't worry about it. Won't hurt your grade. There's more important things than quiz one in life, and it just won't hurt. I'll figure something else out. I assume that I'll be able to get to San Antonio by September 11th, and I'll just figure out something in a way that you learn and it doesn't hurt your grade. If I have time, I'll get the assignment out, the one I wrote about yesterday, that I want you to turn in by Wednesday, September 6th. I'll do that after I record this podcast, but if things go haywire, I'll figure something else out. Okay, so DaVaca, after at the end of his journey, as I talked about in the last podcast, he walks basically from Galveston Island all the way to Baja California. Really incredible what he did, he and his three compatriots. And they're shocked when they get there, when they reconnect with the Spanish, because the Spanish in what's now Sinaloa are taking slaves. And DaVaca has been, he's developed a tremendous appreciation for the multiple Indian groups whose territory he's passed through on his way to basically almost the Pacific coast of Mexico. And one of the things I really can't stress enough to you in this course is there was never one Indian group that dominated this entire area. The closest that happened was the Comanche from about the 1750s to the 1850s. But even when the Comanches were running the show in Texas, there were still multiple other Indian groups that they often allied themselves with, sometimes fought with. So when you look at this territory, and I should bring up this map. When you look at this territory, what you need to think, there's no United States, there's no unified nation, nothing of the sort. There are dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of different Indian groups, especially in the desert areas of northern Mexico, who are holding on to their possessions. This was a very difficult place to live. And as DaVaca walks through there, he gains a following. People think he's has these magical healing powers. And he, on the other hand, gains a lot of respect for the different Indian groups. And he's shocked when he reconnects with his fellow Spaniards near the Pacific coast because they're taking slaves. And he talks about that in the excerpt that I'm having you read. So to talk about that for a second, what happens is DaVaca, he reconnects with the Spanish, goes to Mexico City. Everybody's amazed that he and his the three other folks that he's traveling with, people thought that they were dead. They can't believe that they survived this ordeal, because the last they'd heard of them, they'd been in Florida, and then suddenly they pop up all the way almost to the Pacific coast in Mexico. I mean, it's incredible. It really is incredible. And so he goes to Mexico City, and ultimately he ends up back in Madrid. Spain controls this territory. And the king asked him to write a report about what happened. Uh, and he does. And that's what you're reading. This report was published. It's called La Relation, the story or the shipwreck or something like that. And it came out in the 1540s, and um, it's the first European description of what is now Texas. And to the extent that we can match up what DaVaca said with what we know about the reality of Texas at that point, it seems to be very, very accurate. DaVaca seems to have really worked hard to tell the truth. Now, there's some things he says that are kind of interesting, like he said nobody that he ever treated died. It's kind of hard to believe that died, of course everybody's going to die, right? But everyone that was sick or that was wounded that he treated got better. We'll never really know if that's true or not, but this is what he claims. But on the whole, what you're reading has a ring of truth to it, and some of it has been verified. Now, there is a copy of La Relation at Texas State, just down or up the road in San Marcos, from the 1540s, and they've generously put the text of La Relation online. So what you're reading is, you're reading the words of a man who was in Texas in the late 1520s, early 1530s, walked almost all the way to the Pacific coast of Mexico. And it's kind of extraordinary. He's kind of reaching out through time to talk to you. And what I want you to look for in the reading, I have a sheet that's very specific. But how does he describe the other Spaniards? Does he only describe them in glowing ways, or is he critical of some of the other Spaniards that he deals with? Look, that's one of the things I want you to look for. How does he describe himself? What are the words he uses? How does he describe Galveston, where he washed ashore? What is his reaction when he comes upon the fellow Spanish way over in what's now western Mexico, and they're taking slaves? What is his reaction to that? So when you look at DaVaca, you're looking at the story of this extraordinary guy who had this extraordinary adventure. And it's much longer. I've just cut out some of it for you guys to read. And I know primary evidence is hard, and it's just seems so outside your realm, and for many of you it's outside your interest. And why do I have to do this? Blah blah blah. But use your imagination. Think how extraordinary it is that you're reading the words of somebody who was in Texas 500 years ago. And he was encountering native groups, and he was having to deal with his own comrades, his own Spanish. And I think if you do that, I think you might find this really, really interesting. And I think the important point is DaVaca is just an amazing person. That he survived this and then lived to tell the tale, I just think says everything you need to know about Wk2DaVaca.